my name is Dominique Fober. I'm a researcher at IRCAM, which is a National Center for Music Creation located in Lyon. And my main research interest is music notation. And I'm developing a system named InScore. And I have, let's say, a very pragmatic approach to music notation. And actually, when I think to music score, all the challenges posed by new technologies are coming in my mind. So I think you are mostly aware of them, but I make a brief recall. Actually, new musical forms, for example, interactive music, gesture-based performances, new instruments, music spatialization, mixed music, are all posing problems of notation and music representation. And as a single example, I show you a performance of a piece from Thierry Domé named Light Music, because it's, to me, a very fascinating and beautiful piece, but above all, because it illustrates perfectly the notation issues. So the piece is for soloist, interactive system, and video projection. And technically, the movements of the hands in the beam of light are captured by a camera, next analyzed, and to trigger or control the sound. And these movements are also generating the video in the background, kind of traces of the movements. So, the piece became quickly a hit in the domain of contemporary music, and quickly also the problem of notation came. And so the question is, how can you transmit this piece to another performer without help of any representation, without the notation? And which is one of the role of the music score. And the problem has been solved by Thierry Domé for this piece, but it's actually more general and affects all the music based on gesture or on new instruments. So that was just to illustrate one of the issues of music notation and representation and linked to new technologies. So usually I consider that new technologies in the musical domain are very demanding in terms of notation, not only for preservation and transmission purposes, but also because the history shows that the musical mind develops better with the help of, with the support of the notation. And in particular, I'm generally considering the cases where no notation or poor representation exists regarding the music notation. But on another side, and I agree with Jonathan, notation itself is a technology. And tools for digital scores are also technology that greatly affects the music score. Animated notation is an example, and that you have seen just. And actually, new technologies as a whole, including the digital score, are producing new forms of music notation. And as an example, I will show you three short pieces that have been designed, composed, and performed by young Chinese students who came to Graham last July for a 2-week summer school. So the summer school was focused on Faust, a functional programming language for designed for real-time signal processing and synthesis, and InScore, an environment for the design of interactive augmented music score was developed at Graham. So The first, so the first performance makes use of a leap motion for one performer and a Wacom tablet for the second one. And also it makes use of non-conventional notation, the score that is projected as all the properties of music notation, a timeline. It's organized in something that looks like free systems. And in addition, it includes information about the captured movement as displayed as a signal and the Wacom interaction displayed as circles. So the next one is based on a camera connected to jitter that makes an analysis of. Oh my God. We have the sound but not the video. No. So it's not really important. Here the projection displays the state of the interaction process, which is one of the problems of interactive music, the lack of information on what happens on a computer side. And to understand how it works, you can imagine you have a red line, which is a cursor that scans. You can imagine a virtual matrix of sounds, and the red line is a kind of cursor that is running through the matrix in a loop. And the performer is using a beam of light to enlighten the matrix, and the sounds are played when crossed by the cursor and lightened by the performer. So also, if this representation has none of the classical score properties, it proved to be very useful for the performer. Ah, here it is. Okay. So, quickly, the last one makes simply use of a smartphone and embedded sensors, and the projection could be compared to animated score. Different sequences are... Okay, I don't know why. Different sequences are identified by different graphics and by their movement and their combinations. So the timeline is not included in the representation, but takes place in real time. So here the students took care of the appearance of the elements, which result in a score that is both a graphic and a sound composition. So at the end of this small concert that was closing the summer school, I was first impressed by the work of the students. They got only a few days to realize that but above all because they made a very original use of the notation. And so I think it puts some light in some of the questions that are the key topics of this symposium. Regarding the question of notation evolution, so the students use of the music representation was completely disconnected from classical notation, but represent a significant evolution. Whether it may affect the tradition is another question that I will leave to the discussion. Regarding the role of the notation, it was really interesting to see how their score were turned to their technological choice and the reverse. And in a given way, there was a kind of mutual influence between both. And so I'm almost finished. And that was including the role of the notation. Regarding ergonomic, it's clear to me that it was affecting the music representation. And now whether a new symbolism is required for that is another question that I will also leave to the discussion. And finally, what does a musical notation system mediate? So that's a big, difficult, open question. I think actually one of the primary role of the music notation was to preserve the music, which is a kind of time mediation between generations of musicians. But if you think of the music representation of a kind of projection of time in space, the music score becomes also a graphic object that can also mediate intentions in the aesthetic level. That's one of the students, the last performance was using this aesthetic level. So that's all, just some thought and reflections about music notation. Thanks. I think there is no time left for questions. Yes?
Oh, let's see if there's any questions. Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, you are presenting here a way of encoding this interaction with the body. And my question is, for example, what would happen, no? Or how do you imagine the future when of technology for notation, when, for example, we use 200 parameters instead of 3 or 4 or 5, like these students were using in the performances, no? So it's like the body complexity, of course, is another level, and then if we can still, if you imagine a future of parameters and technology mediating them, or is, I don't know, another solution maybe possible?
Yeah, that's really an interesting question. Actually, I'm really very pragmatic with my approach to music notation, and generally I'm trying to imagine things in concrete situations, and but because when I imagine things, I try to also imagine how I can translate that into my system, into InScore. How can I open the system so that the composer or the performer can write things that he wants to write. Actually, when you have... I don't have any definitive answer to your question. The core, I think, I tried not to think how to represent the music, but to design a system that it opened as much as possible to any kind of representation, but with a semantic that that is as much as possible musical and not graphical. That's the way I try to think the different things. But anyway, mapping gesture and to writing for gesture and so on maybe the extension of the semantic of the elements needs to be extended toward gestures or mappings or things like that. Does it answer your question?
Brilliant. Thank you, Dominique. We will continue now.